is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 621. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line, that's right, he's back all the way from Denver, Colorado. It's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, welcome back. We missed you.
Oh, I'm glad to be back.
How are things going with Santiago, your new child?
Good. He's joining us for this show, actually. So
oh, baby.
we're recording this at 2 a.m. Denver time, and this was actually by request, as you can see, because the way our schedule works out, and we're actually kind of into a pattern now, which is good because that gives us some consistency. Mm-hmm. Is I've got him from like 1 or 2 a.m. to around 7 a.m., 8 a.m. Okay. And he spends a lot of that time sleeping. So I decided, why not try to fire off a show and see how that goes. We'll see if he cooperates. And I don't know. I'm just excited to be back on the show. Taking a couple weeks off was obviously great, but you know me, I'm kind of itching to do something.
Yeah, it doesn't
20
suit
cube
your
trophies
style.
this week because I wanted to get something done. But yeah, it's been good.
And you're going to be diving really deep because, the turnaround time on this set was really, really fast. Normally, we'd be looking at another couple of months, and instead, we've just got another week or so before Crimson Vow is here, and we'll probably be doing the set review next week, assuming the schedules align. And wow, right back in, Luis. It's really great to have you back. We had some awesome guests on the show in your absence, but
and you had TBS too, right?
And we also happen to have TBS. Yeah, he was, he made it on the show as well. And anyway, it's great to have you back. We're going to be doing the Sunset Show. So you came back just in time to do one of our heavy hitters. This is going to be the Innistrad Midnight Hunt Sunset Show. So before we get into all the fun awards and cards and stuff that we're going to be talking about for it, let's talk about our sponsors, channelfireball.com. They're a marketplace now, and that's a big benefit if you're hunting for singles. When you go to Channel Fireball now, you're going to see not only the cards available from one store, but from numerous different card stores, retailers, etc., across the internet, as it is like an aggregator for those. So if you type in the card that you want, it's going to give you a list of the cards that are available from each of those resellers that fit that description. And that lets you have a couple of things. It lets you price shop directly. It also lets you, you can kind of tune into exactly what you'd like. Like, let's say you don't mind if a card's played a little bit, right? You're going to put it in the sleeve. It's totally fine. You're not, collecting it to collect it or whatever. Well, you might be able to find a little bit better of a price at one of the stores that has one that's say moderately played or lightly played or something like that. But also, if you're the type of person that wants only near mint cards, you can shop that way as well. The cool part is it's all laid out right in front of you in the Channel Fireball marketplace. Make sure that you check that out if you need to pick up some singles. If you do end up getting anything over at CFB as well, if you use the affiliate code LR, I do appreciate it. It helps out the show and lets them know that we sent you over. The show is also brought to you by FTX. That's FTX.us here in the United States, FTX.com outside of it. And this is really the best place. It's secure. It's also regulated here in the States. It's a place to buy and sell digital assets. As we move forward with blockchain technology, things like cryptocurrencies, NFTs, and a whole bunch of other kind of exciting things on the horizon, there's some potential game changers here. And if you're interested in it, FTX is a great place to take your first step into the realm of blockchain-based technologies and digital assets. It's kind of a strange new world. It's been around for a while now, but there's a lot to learn. And it's really interesting space with some really great potential, and we'll have to all see where it goes. If you are interested in checking it out, FTX.us here in the United States and FTX.com outside is the place to go. I will remind you that neither Luis and I are registered investors, so make sure you consult one before you do investments of any kind. The show is also brought to you by you via the Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources. We thank everybody on the Patreon. It really does mean the world to us. If you want to become a patron, you get access to a bunch of cool stuff, including a thank you card and a LR sticker sent to you in the mail. That's for any level. We just wanted to make sure that the people who took the time to support us got something cool in the mail. And then beyond that, you get access to the LR feed, and there's a bunch of cool stuff that you can get as you work your way up the chain. Again, thanks to everybody on the Patreon. We're not going to do Patreon question of the week this week because we've got a whole lot to cover, including the last Crack-A-Pack for Innistrad Midnight Hunt. So let's do that. And Luis, what percent chance do you think we have to open an Organ Hoarder here and just call it a draft? Call it a pick?
Oh, I mean, if we do open one, we're like, what, 85% to take it or something?
Yeah, there's very few cards even at higher rarities that we take over it.
I don't know what the odds of opening a specific common are. 1 in 5, something like that. 1 in 6.
I can't remember. I think that the first show that you were out, I had Sirkovitz on him. He rattled that off. I can't remember what it was, but at any rate, let's get into this thing. Our first card is Gale Drifter, which kind of disappointed.
Exactly medium.
Mm-hmm. Larder Zombie, that one moved up our rankings a bit.
Yeah, I'm not at the point where I would take Larder Zombie over Gale Drifter. Pick one, pack one. I don't think, but I do like the Larder Zombie.
Sun Gold Barrage, that's the 2 and a white instant destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater. Never really saw much play. I think I cast him against once or twice. Here's a real card, Revenge of the Drowned. Turns out that one's just a straight up removal spell, and it ended up being a great performer in this set.
Yeah, just like every other card that made a decay token, it was basically priced as if it didn't. And Revenge of the Drowned is a card I'm not like thrilled to first pick, but I'm satisfied to do so.
Abandon the Post, didn't really see much play. Plummet, occasionally out of the sideboard, but still didn't see that much anyway. Candlelit Cavalry, sure, but it's not competing with Revenge of the Drowned. Clarion Cathars, that's a 3/3 that makes a 1/1 for 4 in white. No. Rotten Reunion. Put this in our decks a little more often than I thought at the beginning of the format, at least. Still not a high pick.
Yeah, I mean, Revenge is quite a bit stronger for the decks that would play Rotten Reunion, though Rotten Reunion was a niche playable as needed.
That brings us to the uncommons, where we have Faithful Mending. That's the blue-white instant. You gain 2 life, draw 2, then discard 2, and it flashes back for 1 blue-white. People did like this in the blue-white Disturb deck, right?
Yeah, I never thought it was that good. Just you didn't really have that much time to spend on this kind of stuff, and you actually didn't even always end up cards on this. In fact, the default is that you're down a card. So overall, I wasn't really that high on the non-board advantage card draw, just because there were so many ways to draw cards that also could put something on the board. So Faithful Mending, not as good as Revenge of the Drowned, even without the gold aspect.
Blood Tithe Collector, that's the 4 and a black 3/4 flying vampire, and if an opponent lost life this turn when it ETBs, they discard a card.
Yeah, this is a fine one. I would still start with Revenge. I think blue is stronger than black as a color, and also Revenge is a 4-mana spell versus a 5-mana spell and a removal spell. So looking like Revenge so far. Yeah,
and it's not going to change with Beloved Beggar. That card was a little difficult to make it work, but it was okay if you could work it, but it's just too difficult to do, and certainly not on the level of Revenge. We've actually got interesting. We've got 2 rares. We've got a foil and a regular. Our regular rare is Haunted Ridge. That's the red-black duel, so womp. But our other rare is Sereth the Viper's Fang. That's the 2GG 3/4. And it gives other tapped creatures you control Death Touch, and untapped one's hexproof, and you can pay 1 and tap it to untap another target creature or land you control.
Interesting. I do like the card. I think it's pretty strong. I think I would still first pick Revenge of the Drowned, and this just kind of speaks to something that we're going to talk about many times in this Sunset show, which is kind of the color imbalance, where I think Sereth and Revenge are comparable. Sereth's probably a little bit stronger as a card, but you'd just much rather start with a blue card than a green card. It leaves you more different, good, productive ways to go. Yeah,
exactly. I would make the same pick, even though I think that's a bug, not a feature, right? Like that like the fact that there's a cool rare like Sereth that's really interesting on board. I mean, I remember watching your stream that one time, and you used your own tapper to tap your guy after blocks or whatever. And it was like, oh God, that's cool. Right. There's just like a lot of neat cool stuff with that. Yeah. And it's just an interesting card. And it's like, I'll just take the Revenge of the Drowned. That's, to me, it's like, given that Revenge of the Drowned is, a reasonable removal spell in the format, it's not even like the top tier. It is for blue, but you know what I mean? It shouldn't, we should want to take this flashy rare, and the fact that green is so much worse, I think is a hit. And again, we'll talk about that more. Before we get into the specifics on the Sunset show though, I did want to talk about our exclusive preview card. I put it up on Twitter a few days ago, but now that we've got you back on the show, Luis, it's time we can talk about it. It's Geralf Visionary Stitcher. And boy, they sent us a nice one this time. It's 2 and a blue for a 1/4 legendary human wizard. And this is a very weird sentence to read on a Magic card, but there it is. Zombies you control have flying. So as if zombies weren't scary enough, now they all of a sudden are all flying around in the air. And it even has more text. You can pay blue, tap it, and sack another non-token creature to make an XX blue zombie creature token where X is the sacrifice creature's toughness.
And one thing to note is it's not at sorcery speed. A lot of onboard sacrifice stuff is only at sorcery speed. The fact that this is rare, I think, is kind of what lets them get away with that. Mm-hmm. But the Geralf is quite strong. I mean, 3 mana, 1/4 that maybe gives something flying, lets you attack right away, but then also just lets you cash in cards for 4/4 flying tokens and whatnot. Seems pretty good. I wonder what the themes of the vampire set are going to be. I wonder if zombies are still going to be good.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, maybe it's just this is just going to prove once and for all that zombies are the best and werewolves and vampires suck. That might be the case if we get into Crimson Vow. Anyway, that's our preview card for it. Super exciting, and I mean that card looks pretty sick and limited, but even outside of that, a lot of people were responding to my tweet with Commander, like, hey, because do you remember was it called Cankrix? The 017 crab?
Yeah.
How sweet is that, right? Make yourself a little 1717 flying zombie for just a little sacrifice. I think that's pretty cool too. Okay, let's get into the actual Sunset Show though here for Innistrad Midnight Hunt. So first up, if you could summarize the set in one sentence, what would it be? And my sentence was just an okay draft experience, but a great gameplay experience.
This might date me, but I'm blue, da ba dee da ba da ba dee da ba. Classic.
Oh man, I remember that song.
Oh yeah,
you're blue. I get it.
It's not to say that you always draft blue, but certainly the deck that jumped out at me right away was blue black. I don't know if you remember, but I streamed, I think the first day the set was online.
I did too.
I drafted blue black, and then I drafted blue black, and then I said, all right, I guess we're drafting blue black. And then I had a run where I drafted blue black, I think 25 out of 30 drafts or something, or something in that proportion, above 85% of the time, or above 80% of the time, and on the way to just hitting #1 mythic, eventually just basically forcing blue black. Eventually you couldn't do that because people really did start to catch on, but initially it was like, wow, the blue and black cards are certainly much better in every other color. So
yeah,
this deck or this format really was dominated by the Esper colors overall, as it turns out, which is weird because it was the werewolf set. We'll get to that in the design development part of it, but I think overall the gameplay really carried the format. So like you said, okay draft experience, great gameplay experience.
Yeah, and that they really did end up leaning on that. Speaking of, what were the best archetypes? We mentioned blue black being kind of the clear winner, right? Like it was the most consistently available, powerful deck. I don't know that it isn't always the case that the one that we pick has the highest peak, right? Sometimes there's an archetype that when it comes together just right is better than, what we would call the best archetype, but easily blue black was the one that had the highest correlation of power, consistency and availability.
Yeah. And blue black, blue white, and white black, the three Esper combinations just got to take advantage of the three best colors, the two blue archetypes, I think, being better overall. In fact, I think blue white was the best performing archetype at the end of the format. Throughout the entire format, it just turns out that blue white was consistent enough. But blue white and blue black certainly felt head and shoulders above everything else. And then I had a kind of dark horse pick, which was green white. I actually drafted a pretty good amount of green white aggro because I just felt like it came together pretty nicely a lot of the time. Yeah,
green white also was a good later format archetype, right? It was one that kind of slipped in the cracks between blue black, blue white. Like there wasn't a lot of fighting for the stuff that you wanted, and it took advantage of an underdrafted color with green as well. Boy, this one was incredible. Which cards were we most wrong about during the set reviews? Which cards really surprised us one way or the other? There was a lot, right? I remember drastic shifts happening in the early parts of the format where, the cards in a vacuum just also. So one thing, the cards in a vacuum perform differently. That's always the case. But there were just some cards that were a little weird, little bit of a design that we hadn't seen before that just performed super well in the format for whatever reason. Lunarch Veteran was one that got a lot of talk early because it still just looked relatively low impact, but it just fit so well into the archetypes that it performed well in, and it ended up being one of the more important cards for those archetypes.
Yeah, and I would just also expand it to just decay in general, where basically every card that made a decayed token was really priced to move. And, in the nature of set reviews, we said like, hey, if you can use these tokens well, these cards look pretty interesting. Yeah. Like we think they're going to be pretty good. And that was true for, cards like, Diregraph Horde and Revenge of the Drowned, where it's like, yeah, these cards look pretty good if you can use the token. Turns out like Flip the Switch and Startle. Like Startle was like, I think the third best blue common or something. It's in the top 5 for sure. And there was enough ways to use these decay tokens that the cards that made them were good and the cards that utilized them were good, like Larder Zombie, Ecstatic Awakener, a huge winner. Even Siege Zombie, which looked, this is pretty good, to like, I will second pick Siege Zombie and be pretty happy about that.
Yes. Which is an indicator for how much we really could use those 2/2 decay zombies. They sat around on the battlefield and they did stuff for you. And who was it? Maybe I had somebody on the show. Maybe Ryan said this or something. I can't remember, but whoever it was made a really great point, which was, it says that they can't block on them, but really they did, because once you got 3 or 4 of them on the battlefield, your opponent simply couldn't just do some big attack without taking a huge amount of damage on the backswing. And that prevented there were board stalls where you had a lot of zombies and you think, okay, well, I've only got 2 or 3 blockers, but if your opponent tried to do some huge attack and it wasn't lethal, they were going to take infinite on the crackback. And that threat from the zombies made it so that they actually did have a defensive component to them, which, I didn't really anticipate, mainly just because there was so many of them around so often, because they kind of just tacked zombies onto everything. I remember thinking that once we knew that they were good, we were just going down the list, right? Because, cards like Falcon Abomination, that just look good anyway, right? You're like, hey, I'm getting a card I'd probably put in my deck and they're tacking a zombie on it. Great. But you mentioned it, Flip the Switch, cards like Startle, right? These are cards that we probably wouldn't put in our deck normally. And all of a sudden they just went right up the charts because it was like, hey, these zombies are real cards. Like we need these things on the battlefield.
Yeah, and it also put a lot of just pressure on your opponent as you just accumulated the zombies over and over again, and then made cards like, Scab Wrangler and Siege Zombie just huge bombs once you could just get them into play with a couple zombie tokens. Yeah. Another one
Go ahead.
to mention is Blessed Defiance.
For sure.
This is the +2/+0 lifelink, and then when it dies, make a 1/1 spirit. And I remember Sutcliffe actually saying, like, imagine this is a 1 mana 1/1 gain 6. 1 mana 1/1 flying gain 6. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually not bad, and it lets you trade up. It turns out it was pretty good in races.
Yes, and it could really be the difference in a race for sure. A card we'll talk about a lot over the course of this as well is Ecstatic Awakener. That one fits that description that I just mentioned, where it wasn't a question of like, does this fit? That was part of it, but also it's just a design we haven't really seen before, right? Like, it was kind of a strange one to get your head around about, like, well, do I really, most of the time if I have to sacrifice a creature, I'm really pretty unhappy with that. Like, I'm giving up board presence. It's kind of giving up the thing now. But the fact that it gave you the card back, really made that an equalizer. And of course, the zombies laying around and the fact that it's in black and a lot of black cards made those zombies was a big game. And then also it was just a freaking 4/4, right? And there were so many like nut draws in this format, right? Like we usually talk about a specific card for the Groan test. But there was definitely a curve out here, right? And it's the classic, right? It was Ecstatic Awakener, Bait Hook Angler, or Ecstatic Awakener, Novice Occultist. Either one of those. And you're just like, oh man, like I am not going to be able to block that thing. They're going to get their cards back out of it. I'm going to have to take a couple of hits from a 4/4 or burn a removal spell on it at some point. And those starts were really tough to beat, especially if you were on the draw.
Yeah. And it just turns out there was so much fodder that the Ecstatic Awakener was just a Cerul's Packmate that was a 4/4.
Yes, it felt like that. Yeah, that's how it felt.
Except it also got to attack on turn 3 because you got to play it on turn 1.
Mm-hmm, totally. And, remember you and I did our stream together. We had 5 of them. Like that was fairly early in the format. But I mean, that was awesome, right? And we ended up just building our whole deck to try to flip it on turn 3. We ran the Rotten Reunion and stuff just to try to get that going. And that's how powerful that card was. And, we like to look at the 17 lands numbers and stuff as as somewhat of a guide or whatever. They're not hard and fast, as we talked about with Sirkovitz and Ryan and stuff. But Ecstatic Awakener's the number 1 rated games in hand win rate black common. I mean,
yeah,
like I don't know how much money I would have lost if you would have said by the end of the format, 17 Lands is going to have that as the number 1 card for a games in hand win rate. I would have said Olivia's Midnight Ambush, Diregraph Horde, maybe Eaten Alive, maybe Defenestrate, just like pick one of the removal spells. I guess I'll take Ambush as the one that I think's the best. And then Diregraph Horde, which just looks like an uncommon or maybe even a rare in some sets or whatever. I would have never guessed that Ecstatic Awakener would outperform those.
Yeah, I think it's a testament to a couple things. One is that the removal spells actually go down in value because of how many there are. Mm-hmm. I think, when there's a lot of different ones, what ends up happening is...
yeah, baby.
Not a fan.
Is Santi pro or anti-removal spell?
I would say that he's pretty aggressive, so I guess that makes you pro removal spell. I'm not sure.
I think so. Yeah,
but I guess there being different removal spells, I guess, doesn't impact the win rate of each individually, but impacts the value when it comes to like, what am I going to pick here? Mm-hmm. I like taking Ecstatic Awakener partially because if I take Ecstatic Awakener over Defenestrate, say, well, the fact that I can pick up Eaten Alive or Olivia's Midnight Ambush, I would, at the end of it, if I had 4 picks to use in these premium stuff, I'd rather have 2 Awakeners, 2 removal spells, and take Awakeners less replaceable.
Yeah.
So just a great card overall.
Yeah, it's also interesting, and we should mention this too. You mentioned the removal spells, but how good they all ended up being. Just to like give you the numbers on 17 lands, the worst of the 3 is Defenestrate with a 57.4, and then Eaten Alive sitting at 58.1, where Olivia's Midnight Ambush is just above it at 58.5. Mm-hmm. And that's fairly well grouped together and in the higher end of things. It's not quite in the Ecstatic Awakener Diregraph Horde, but still normally we see 3 removal spells from black. One of them is fringe playable, kind of you have to do it sometimes. And then the other 2, one of them will be the preferred one, and then one of them will be the kind of secondary one. And in this case, it was like all 3 were just really good.
Yeah, you never really felt bad about playing them. I think Defenestrate was the one that I wanted the least.
Yeah.
But it still ended up like if you told me that I was going to have 4 of these, I just like kind of wouldn't really care how they were split. I would just want a mix of them.
Yeah, that's kind of how I see it too. So anyway, so there's those. What about the underrated cards in this set? One that came to mind was Shipwreck Sifters. Like it took a while for people to kind of figure that one out, particularly in the blue-white archetype.
Yeah, I think that the fact that it was awesome in blue-white and kind of unplayable outside of it without specific, circumstances really did make it so on first read it was like, hey, this doesn't look that good. But if you considered it a blue-white gold card, yeah, the card ended up being awesome. And one of the best blue cards ended up being Bait Hook Angler. Like kind of in the vein of Ecstatic Awakener. I mean, not quite as in your face powerful, but Bait Hook Angler, I mean, it's a 2-mana 2/1 that trades and gets you a 1/2. It's like a low-key Lingering Souls, where you trade and get a 1/2 flyer at very, very cheap rate. Bait Hook Angler was a card that you really wanted in all the blue archetypes. It was incredibly important in blue-white, very good in like the blue-green self-mill deck, and in blue-black with all the sacrifice, the worst it probably was in red-blue, and even then, it's not like I wasn't going to play it.
Totally. We mentioned Blessed Defiance being one of them that was underrated. I guess I don't really know how to approach these ones is Neonate's Rush, which, you know, it kind of went end to end on the format as being the number one ranked red common over Moonrager's Slash, by the way, within like a percentage point, but still, you know, it was clear a percentage point of it, which is still just like kind of baffling to me. Like I still would just take Moonrager's Slash. I just can't get my head around taking Neonate's Rush over it.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I wasn't, when we look at the top commons, like I have like Neonate's Rush question mark as like the best red common. I'm not sure.
But I guess we're still underrating it. Is that the story?
Festival Crusher, but
yeah.
And this is a case where I could look at the win rates on things and think like, well, okay, I kind of get this. I guess if this is winning more than that, you know, it's hard for me to tell the difference. When it comes to Neonate's Rush versus Moonrager's Slash, it's like I kind of still don't believe it, or at least don't really know what to do with that. I'll probably still just continue taking Moonrager's Slash in a lot of the cases. Or not drafting red is actually the real answer. Yeah,
I mean, that's probably part of the reason is that we don't have as much experience with the red decks because that's really, you know, one of the lower. It's either the worst or the second worst color depending on how you see it. Another card that's a little, I think, under the radar is Tapping at the Window. That one, you know, really didn't see any play for a long time. I actually saw you start playing it when you were streaming a bunch, and then I think people started to pick it up a little bit. Not that it's a great card, it's not, but it is a little better than it looked. And it does actually have at least somewhat of a place in the format.
Yeah.
You know, without being particularly good. What were the most controversial cards?
Well, Lunar Veteran definitely gets the award, I think, partially because we had that Twitter thread where Siggy talked about how bad the card was, and I weighed in saying, like, yeah, most of the people who played Lunar Veteran against me, it hasn't been looking good. Mm-hmm. And it just turns out, like, this card is probably not at its best in decks that, you know, aren't that like focused on getting value from it. Mm-hmm. But then you put it in a good blue-white or white-black deck, and it becomes excellent. I even liked it in white-green, though that format was aggressive, or deck was aggressive enough that I didn't always want it as much as like something like Harvest Tide Century.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Santi on this one, by the way. Not a huge fan of Lunark Veteran in green-white, but I definitely liked it in all the other white color pairs. Yeah, I just wanted it to you know, I wanted the utility, not just of the two creatures, but of, you know, all the other things that go along with it. I mean, even in blue-white, the life gain ended up being super important, among other things. What was your favorite artwork for the set?
I actually really liked Bait Hook Angler by Uriah Voth, where you have this like grumbling dude, like, I'm going to be out here until I catch something. And then there's like the fish looming behind him, which you don't see on first look, which I think looks pretty sweet. Oh,
that is sweet. I didn't apparently see that on first or 10th look. My favorite was Smoldering Egg. I loved that card. I love the design. I love the way it played. I thought it was awesome. And I have to say that, I don't know, it's like a little bit of a throwback to Rook Egg, you know, from all the way back in Arabian Nights.
I do love a Rook Egg.
I do too. And so there's definitely some nostalgia there. But yeah, I really liked when that one was by Simon Dominic. And then I have to say, this is the first time that I've felt the need to do this, but I have to give least favorite artwork. Now, this isn't commenting on the quality of the work itself, but it's the work I do not want to see. Flesh Taker? Yeah, I'm not taking. You can keep that creepy butcher cow thing, Kev Walker.
Well, it's also a human, so you know they're wearing a mask.
So you know that they're just wearing a cow head over their real. Yeah, no. Nope. I'm off it. Not a fan of scary movies, and definitely not a fan of that one. What were the best build-arounds for the set? There's actually quite a few. This didn't feel like a particularly build-around-y set, but going through, we have Smoldering Egg, which I think is probably my favorite one. Geist Flame Reservoir, that's a real build-around. Seize the Storm. Sirkovitz talked about that on his episode, and it was like, yeah.
He's obsessed with that card.
He loves that card, yeah. Ominous Roost. Sigarda's Splendor, that's the one that rewards you for, raising your life total. I put Delver of Secrets. I mean, I don't, you can't just throw Delver in any old deck. It's not quite the full on build around, but you do, that is a card. If you can get one or two of them, you can kind of do some things. And then to a lesser extent, Ghoulish Procession, which really got mixed reviews. I know you're not a big fan of it, but some people really liked it. I still can't decide if it's any good.
I think it's crap. I just don't think it gets there almost ever, but it is a card you could try to build around for sure.
So what do you like for best build around?
I like Geistflame Reservoir. I thought that card is really rewarding to play. I really loved it in like red-black with like Crawl from the Cellars and stuff like that. I thought it was a really sweet card.
I did too. I gave it to Smoldering Egg. I like the mini game that happens when you put a Smoldering Egg into play because, your opponent doesn't necessarily know if you're going to flip it or not. And if they use removal spell on it and you weren't going to flip it anyway, you feel like a genius, right? Because you're like, haha. And but if they don't and you get to flip the thing, it's just over. Like the game ends so quickly. Generally speaking, most people would err on just kill the egg if you have a chance to kill it, because it wasn't that hard to flip. Like you needed like basically a flashback spell or something like that. But I still like the tension that it gave.
I think that the build arounds were largely spell build arounds. We have like 4 different spell build arounds here. And it's unfortunate because the spells deck, I think, mostly didn't come together. But these cards were fun when they worked. I wouldn't call any of them that you listed, except maybe like Ghoulish Possession and Sigarda's Splendor, like actually like duds. The rest of these were good. It was just hard to be in the deck where those things were good.
Yeah.
Also, build arounds do lose a little bit of their luster when the card quality in the format is really high. Like, when you really put a lot of work into it, this is the problem with like Ghoulish Procession or even like Seize the Storm. Are you getting something that's that much better than just casting all the blue and black or blue and white cards? Usually not.
Usually not. Yeah. It's fun and it is interesting. And I do prefer sets generally that have build arounds and that it's actually like worth going for. And this set did fall a little short on that, but it is what it is. Which card still looks good when you read it, but it just doesn't see play?
For me, it's Ardent Elementalist, the 4-mana 2/1 that gets a spell back. It's such an aggressive rate for that kind of card, but those decks are not good.
I know. It's so weird because if I just refuse to believe that card's not good, right? Like there's all this cheap removal. It's 4 mana. It even puts something on the board, while buying you your removal spell or card draw or whatever back. And it just ended up being, kind of homeless, really. It wasn't really its fault, right? It's not you, it's me. The ones that I picked, there's a couple. One of them is just Vivisection. In the set that it was printed in before, maybe a couple of times, it was pretty good. Like you could put that card in your deck and, get ahead on cards and feel pretty good about it. And it's just like really unplayable here, which is bizarre because when I read it, I still see it and go, well, there's all these decay zombies, right? So like perfect. And it just never, like I just never wanted to actually put that card on the stack. I felt like I would die anytime I did it. And another one that's also seen, that's had better days, shall we say, in older sets is Unruly Mob. Look, that card's never like, super impressive or anything like that. But when I read it, I'm just still thinking like, this should be good. There's a black-white sacrifice deck. There's a whole bunch of disturbed creatures that you don't mind if they die, and that should pump up the mob. And then, of course, there's decay zombies that you can just kill at will. You can just send them into the red zone. If they get blocked and die, great. If they don't, they get in for some damage and they die. And all of a sudden, your Unruly Mob's a 4/4. And that never happened, ever. I don't think I did that or saw people do that. I'm assuming
sometimes they would get it to a 5/5 and you'd cast Revenge of the Drowned.
Yeah, right. That's what I was going to say, is that I assume this is a casualty of the fact that the removal is just too good for a card like Unruly Mob. It seemed like it would have a home, but it didn't. And
I think something like Vivisection suffers even more from the duplicate problem that removal does, where there's so many good ways to draw cards that the medium ways get pushed out really, really strongly.
Yeah. Flashback, doesn't leave a lot of room for cards that are just raw card advantage. Was this a Prince or a Pauper set?
I actually think it was Pauper by quite a bit.
It's just super Pauper, right?
Just all the removal spells means that they're like, wow, I play my Sludge Monster. You're like, okay, I cast Eaten Alive. Organ Hoarder was a rare level card in terms of power level. And just the commons overall had such good synergy and such good power that Yeah, you didn't need the higher rarity cards. Not that there weren't bombs, but it was definitely not a print set.
Yeah, it's funny. I accidentally put Prince when I was writing this out, but I meant to put Pauper. And when I looked at the show notes and I saw that one of us said Prince and one of us said Pauper, I was like, wow, really? He thinks this is a Prince set? And I'm like, oh, wait, I wrote that. And I'm like, no. The funny part about this is that instead of it being equalized down at the common level, it's like the commons raised up, right? There was a Pauper revolt, and all of a sudden the commons started acting like rares. I mean, some of these commons in this set are just completely off the charts on power level, and it really did even things out. Yes, there were some good bombs, but it almost never felt like those were the things that ruled the day. I mean, I saw you know, this is a good indicator too. You were talking about how you played blue-black so many times early in the format. You cannot force decks like that, right? That can win if it's a Prince format, because you just run into one bomb and you can't do it because your card quality is going to suffer if you force. And that didn't happen at all. You literally made number one mythic doing that. So there you go.
Well, you also end up in a spot where if it's a Prince format and you open an off-color rare, you have to take it. Like you open a green rare and you can't draft blue-black.
Yeah. But
I was just, I remember taking Organ over Augur of Autumn in one of the early streams, and Ben S making fun of me. He's like, oh, we're not forcing, are we? I'm like, no, I actually think this is just better. So,
yeah,
here we are.
And that's what we in our Crack a Pack, right? Like we didn't take the 2GG, Seraph or whatever, right? It's just like that really is another indicator of a Pauper set. What's it's a bad card, but I love it anyway. What award? What wins that for you?
For me, I think it's Secrets of the Key. It was just like, oh man, I can draft this red blue deck, a bunch of secrets and self mill and like ways to get card advantage. And it's just like, nah, you should just cast Organ Hoarder.
It's so sad that's where we ended up, but that is, yes.
Yours is something similar, right?
It's very similar. It's Curse of Surveillance. That's the blue curse that draws you cards. I mean, I know it underperforms. And, this really does fall victim to what you just mentioned about how, card draw only sources really do get bumped when there's really ample sources of card draw that are kind of built into board affecting cards. And casting a spell that costs 5 mana and doesn't do anything is really not a thing you can do in this format. But I still love it, man. I don't care, right? It says draw an extra card every turn. I even talk myself into it because it's like, I get it. Not quite right away, but almost right away. Like, back on my turn again, I already have the extra card. But yeah, Curse of Surveillance. I do not recommend playing it if you're trying to win. What about I literally never win with it, but it always seems to beat me card?
For me, it's got to be Voldaren Ambusher, though I guess a subset of that is Vampire Interloper. I just don't put these cards in my deck, but then sometimes you just play against Boros or Red-Black, and they're just like, all right, curve my 2-drop into Ambusher, killing your 2-drop, and it's just like, wow, that's what this card's supposed to do when you're that aggressive. And it just mostly for me, it's like, yeah, I'm not playing this card, but I also am not beating it.
Yeah, that's a good one. For me, it was Locked in the Cemetery because I know better, so I stopped playing it really early in the format, and it ended up being really just bad. Not even subpar removal, but just not a card you ever really wanted in your deck. But it is still removal in the right scenario, right? And there are still circumstances where it effectively is just 2 mana, kill your thing. And that's really, and even keeps it out of the graveyard, which can be a benefit for, disturbed creatures and stuff like that. And I just felt like whenever somebody played it, it was really good for that one moment, even though I knew, on average, it shouldn't be a card you put in your deck very often. But yeah. This is a big one. What was my opponent played this, so now I must win or quit Magic forever card?
Oh, definitely Mystic Skull. The 2-mana artifact that filters colors, then you can turn it slowly into a 5/6 or whatever.
It's a 5/6. It's huge.
Yeah. Well, let's just say that the Lord's Limited played this, and I'm glad we won the showdown. Though it was mostly on the back of you and BK.
Yeah. I have Bramble Armor. Right. Somebody plays out a Bramble Armor. I mean, I think somebody sent us a screenshot that somebody had ran out back-to-back Bramble Armors with no creatures on the battlefield. And they were like, I have to win now, right? I'm like, yes, you do. That is not like you lose to that opponent. You're in really bad shape. I do have to throw in a last minute, here though. Does Stuffed Bear just swoop in and steal this or what?
Oh, yeah, actually, that's probably the best of it, especially since somehow Stuffed Bear was one of the more controversial where, I don't know about you, I did not have a stream where someone didn't want me to take and play Stuffed Bear.
Every time I had one in my sideboard, they were like, you could run the Stuffed Bear. I'm like, no, I couldn't. What are you talking about? It's just bizarre because I understand that people get tricked by it, right? But there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that the card sucks in that, like, how many times did you lose to Stuffed Bear? Like, never. It never happened. Nobody was like Stuffed Bear, and I'm like, oh, that's a problem. It was like, oh, thank God, right? You're spending all your mana to do nothing. I'm going to beat you easily. Yeah, Stuffed Bear with the late edition win on opponent played this, and now I have to win or quit Magic. What was the biggest groan test for this set? You answered this, and you just nailed it.
Yeah, I mean, it was Morbid Opportunist because It wasn't like Overrun in that you lost that turn, but if you ever have an opponent with a Morbid Opportunist in play, you feel like you cannot win the game, and you're slowly, or not that slowly, losing as they're drawing 2, maybe 3 cards a turn, depending on how good they are at triggering it. It's just such a demoralizing card to play against.
It really is. You just look at it and you're like, oh my God. Yeah, Morbid Opportunist, congratulations. What was the most frustrating kind of quote bad card to lose to, or maybe a card you won't miss playing against or whatever? For me, it was Cathar's Call, which is bizarre because generally I think I beat that card pretty handily. Like I generally have like, good amount of interaction and stuff like that. I tend to prioritize it, etc. But there were some times where somebody ran out a timely Cathar's Call and just populated the board with a whole bunch of 1/1s, and I wasn't able to beat it. And I'm just like, I cannot believe I'm losing to a 3 mana, slow sorcery speed aura that gets on. I mean, it's just really the most miserable way to go.
I think Stolen Vitality, because it's one of the tricks that I didn't think was very good, but definitely could, perform in some cases. But every time my opponent cast it, especially when it was to like give trample but still trade and I take 4, I was not impressed.
Thoughts on the artwork on that card too? Kind of creepy, right?
I hated it so much. The blood in the teeth was too much for me.
Yeah, that one is. They did a good job with that. Let's see who did that. That was Mike Bierek. Very, very nice job creeping us out. What was the bombiest bomb? The card you hoped most to open in your pack one, pick one, or your sealed pool or whatever?
Oh, for sure, Meat Hook Massacre. I think this card's the best card in the set because it was a modal, like a wrath that like scaled the way you wanted. So if you had a 4/4 and they had all smaller, you wouldn't lose your creature. And it nugs them for a bunch, gains you some life, and it sticks around and keeps doing that. And if that wasn't enough, Geist Wave plus this, that's a Mondo combo. All right, you get to bounce back the Meat Hook Massacre, draw a card for your trouble, and then sweep the board again. Yeah,
that's disgusting. It also happened to be the number 1 games in hand win rate card on 17 lands as well. So yes, indeed.
I didn't actually know that, but I still thought the card was the best.
I did too, and I wanted to check it, and it is that. All right, what was the best common for each color? Now, this I think would have been very difficult to predict. Before we drafted the set, sometimes we actually get pretty close, right? But this one I think would have been harder, or these ones. So what do you have for each color?
Lunarch Veteran for white. I think that one's not particularly close, with Candle Grove Witch also being a card I liked quite a bit in white. Organ Hoarder, head and shoulders and every other body part it's got lying around above everything else. I mean, and blue has a deep roster too. There's a lot of good commons. Baithook Angler, Revenge of the Drowned, Startle, Flip the Switch, all fantastic cards. But yeah, it's definitely Organ Hoarder, just the mythic common of the set, which is not even a category we have.
Right.
Because most sets don't have one. In fact, this isn't like kind of the first time I even heard us using this verbiage because it was that much better than every other common. It's just
I wonder if we should make this a category, the Organ Hoarder award for mythic common. I just don't know if we'll see one like this. We'll have to feel it out.
And then for black, Ecstatic Awakener, again, ahead of some really good cards like Midnight Ambush, Defenestrate, Eaten Alive, Siege Zombie, Diregraph Horde. So like the top 6 black commons are all better than like the top red common, for example, which I put Neonate's Rush, I guess, but I'm just really low confidence here.
Yeah.
Festival Crasher, maybe.
Can we just say, what's it called? Moonrager Slash? Can we just do that?
It might just be Festival Animal Crasher, though. It could be neither of these.
It is that one is definitely the card that makes enough decks tick that we have to pay more attention to it. That's for sure.
Yeah, and then for green, I really like Eccentric Farmer. We haven't talked about it on the show this much, but green, or like this on the Sunset show, but the green-blue self-mill deck, I really enjoyed playing, and Eccentric Farmer was a huge part of that.
Yep, and I really like Shadow Beast sighting as a green common, but Farmer was clearly the best one. I mean, some people had the nerve to call it the green organ hoarder, but thankfully that rhetoric calmed down a little bit as the set went on. What was a mythic uncommon for the set?
I think it was actually Scott Wrangler. The Morbid Opportunist is knocking on the door as well. In both cases, it's really hard to lose if these things survive. Scott Wrangler has a bigger effect on the board because it can just completely dominate the whole game in terms of combat. But Morbid Opportunist is better if they kill it in 2 turns because you probably drew a couple cards off it, in some cases right away.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting. I mean, these self-select a bit. If you look at the numbers on 17 lands, it's actually Blade Stitch, Scob, and Devoted Graphkeeper. But I feel like that's kind of cheating, right? Because like those are played so much less often than a card like Scob Wrangler. Like, you know, for example, the sample sizes that they have here for Blade Stitch are about 40,000 games in hand. And for Devoted Graphkeeper, it's about 32. But the next one is Scob Wrangler, and that has 63, you know, so pushing double the sample. And, you know, to me, that means, you know, that if you draft it, pack one, pick one, you know, you have a better chance of actually having it in your deck and doing things. So I like Scob Wrangler for number 1. And then we have to give a shout out to the Mythic Common Organ Hoarder, as we just mentioned. What's the worst card in the set? The biggest blank, the most last picked?
I had Moonsilver Key play against me once, and it was confusing. It's a 3-mana way to get a land out of your deck. There's also Necrosynthesis is a card
that's a good one.
At least has a little appeal because of the dream is you get a bunch of +1/+1 counters, then gain a bunch of life. But I think Moonsilver Key is the actual worst card in the format.
All right, Moonsilver Key, congratulations. You are the worst. Man, I don't know how you nail this one every single time, but you did it again. What card is the most begrudgingly playable you have? Shady Traveler. It's just perfect. It's so begrudgingly playable.
I'm sure you do this the same way when we do the Sunset show. We have all the questions. You have the spoiler up for the set, and you're just like looking through it. And I just kind of wait till inspiration strikes. And Shady Traveler is just like maybe the best pick in this show for its category of.
It's so good.
Like. It's a card that's fine to put in your deck, and sometimes you'll play it on turn 3, and then they don't have a play, or you go like turn 3, play it, turn 4, do nothing, flip it, and cast Revenge of the Drowned on their turn, and you're just like, wow, this card's great. But you're never excited about it, and you cut it like half the time. So it's like, Shady Traveler really, really gets there in terms of begrudgingly playable.
Just frame it. That's just an all-timer. Is there any card you'll miss drafting?
ABH, Oldby Horton. I mean, look, Organ Hoarder's overpowered. Organ Hoarder contributed to the imbalance of the colors. I don't care. Organ Hoarder was really fun to play. I did more drafts of Innistrad Midnight Hunt than any format in the past 3 years.
Yeah. You went
many drafts.
Super hard. Yeah, totally. And Organ Hoarder was a big part of it, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was a combination of, obviously, like, it's fun to win, and I was winning a lot in the format, but, like, that is never the primary driver for me. It was that I really enjoyed the gameplay, and Organ Hoarder is a really fun card to play with.
Yeah. And, you know, for me, there was actually, it's interesting because I think I loved an Organ Hoarder as well, but there were actually a lot of cards when I like Louis said it, I'll go through through Scryfall and just sort of look at the cards and kind of remember what I like to do and what I did. And there's actually just a ton of cards that I'm going to miss playing. I think I'll just miss the format. I really felt like the gameplay carried it, that the styles of decks suited me. Traditionally, I like almost any set with flashback. This has it, and that, tends to play to the type of games that I like to play. I found the gameplay very, very challenging in this set. And so, I'll miss that too, because I like that part of it. But there's a ton of cards, that are in here. I'll miss playing Smoldering Egg. I really like that one. I really liked, what's it called? The stupid pinger thing, the uncommon one. I love that in red. I love that guy.
The Thermo Alchemist?
Yeah, Thermo Alchemist. I don't know why, but I've always really liked that card. Ecstatic Awakener was super fun. I loved playing back-to-back Grave Titans. Just go diagraph forward, and all of a sudden you have like 100 power on board. There's a ton of cards I'll miss, but yeah, I mean, Organ Hoarder's probably the top. What was the LSV-est card and the Martialist card?
the timelines have converged, and I think Organ Hoarder is really the answer for both.
It is.
It just strikes all the notes we want, and I mean, I don't know. It's just we're not going to see a common like this for a while, is my prediction.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, man. Always be hoarding. Always be hoarding. It's perfect.
Remember when it was tough, to some degree, choosing between Behold the Multiverse and Cyril's Packmate?
Mm-hmm.
What if you combine the two cards?
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, it's perfection. It's all we've ever wanted. So yes, we both picked Organ Hoarder. And I mean, look, if you're listening to this show, you know that Luis and I are big fans of value, right? We like to get our Val, and Organ Hoarder had that in absolute spades, and you could actually get them. What was my soapboxiest card? It has to be Diagraph Forward. I didn't soapbox this out against any, listeners or anything like that, but I just don't understand the design on this card or how it got printed at Common. The fact that it had so many knobs that you could turn to kind of even it out a little bit and make it at least somewhat reasonable, and then they all just seem to get turned up to the maximum. Like, I don't really understand why you get 2 zombies. I don't understand why you exile 2 cards. That part is just egregious to me. Like, I can't believe that it's on there. I do understand that there may be a slight flavor thing where if you exile 2 creatures, for example, that you would get 2 of the zombies, and that's kind of a neat, you're digging them up or whatever. But like, that isn't what the card says. You just get the zombies no matter what, and you can, exile 0, 1, or 2 card. Like, I never really quite got around to understanding why they printed this card at Common. And the fact, I really find it offensive. Like, this card would have been 100% fine if it was just make the 3/4 zombie, make a 2/2 decay token, go. Like, that would have been 5 power, 7 toughness, or 6 toughness, over 2 creatures. You get your extra little token, cool. And then they're like, okay, screw it. We're going to throw another zombie in the mix here. It's like, wow. Okay. So you just up me to 7, power, 8 toughness. Like, that's really a lot. Like, I can do a lot with this. There's, a cycle of cards that trigger off of me having 3 creatures. Just gives me the 3 creatures straight away, to tap, for siege zombie and stuff. So that's pretty cool. But then they're just like, you know what? Let's just go more, right? Let's have it do something that is really powerful in this format, which is exile other people's cards from their graveyard. I mean, that is in some ways taking cards just out of their hand, just off the table. I have no idea how the heck they thought, yeah, you know what? We'll just print this thing at Common. This could have been an uncommon and we wouldn't have blinked. We wouldn't have said, oh, maybe. And that actually makes me wonder if it was at some point an uncommon and it got bumped down and just didn't get kind of enough taken away. But I always thought that the exiling stuff was too far and unnecessary for it. So I can slide my soapbox away now, but that is definitely the winner for that. What card do you still have to read when it's cast against you?
For sure, it's Enduring Angel, because it's really bad to get that one wrong, because it saves them from certain death. And it's just like this enormous flyer. It's a very weird card. It is a mythic, so I haven't played against it much or with it much. But yes, I always have to read that one. Definitely
high on my list as well. The one I picked was Jaren Corrupted Bishop, which is like, that thing has a lot going on. That's the one. Here, I'll just read it. It's 2 and a black, 2/3. Legendary human cleric. It's mythic. It's got 2 sides. The front side is whenever Jaren, a corrupted bishop, enters the battlefield or another non-token human you control dies, you lose 1 life and create a 1/1 white human creature token. And then you can pay 2 to give target human you control lifelink until end of turn. And then it says at the beginning of your end step, if you have exactly 13 life, you may pay 4 black. If you do, you transform Jaren into a 6/6 flying trample lifelink demon that says sack another creature to draw a card. I never actually saw that thing get flipped into Ormondal the Corruptor. But yeah, that is one when they played and I'm like, okay, what's going on again? Like, when do you get the humans? What is this activated ability? And all that kind of stuff. All right, let's get into the meat of this thing here. From a design and development aspect, how did this set fare? How are the mechanics? What were some of the wins and some of the losses for it?
I mean, you can't talk about the set without looking at the color balance. It was
the color imbalance.
Yes, I guess that's even a better way to put it. Where blue, black, and white were head and shoulders above red and green, and specifically the red-green combination, which is werewolves, which is the name of the set, Midnight Hunt, was really bad. And we've covered this, in a couple reasons. The large amounts of removal, extra cards like Silver Bolt just hanging out and, just really making the werewolves bad. The commons overall just being so weak. Like, how many good blue and black commons do you have to go through before you get something that's on par with the best red and green commons? It's like 10.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's like 10 or 11. I mean, you're over halfway through.
It's just crazy. And white is less egregious because white's commons aren't actually that good. It's just the combination of them works out. It's a more synergy-based deck. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the color balance is way off. That being said, the gameplay was very good. So those are both kind of development issues to a degree, like design. So when I say design development, right, design is like kind of initial design of like the themes of the set, the initial mechanics, what the set looks and feels like, and then development does like tuning of that. And sometimes you get new mechanics in development, of course, but a lot of it is like the developers play design are going to try to figure out what are the right numbers. Should this card be a 3/2 or a 3/3? Should this card cost 4 or 5? And then tweaking it to get to a point where ideally it's, somewhat balanced. And I've long since been, beating the drum that fun matters more than balance. And I think this set is a testament to that. Mm-hmm. This set's really fun. It is not particularly balanced. And I think that's okay.
I wonder why they missed. Like, I feel like if I was on a design team and we had our early meetings, I would assume that they would think, hey, let's make sure that werewolves look pretty cool, right? Like that they work and that, they clearly put a lot of effort into the day-night thing. It's a weird mechanic. It asks quite a bit. It has you track things.
Oh, yeah. I guess if we're doing a retrospective on the Sunset Show, some people found that mechanic confusing, especially in the set review. So
that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. But really, like, it was a lot, right? Like, I think as far as gameplay goes, it worked. Like, it was cool to give the power to me to say, okay, fine, I'm going to pass a turn, but I get to flip my werewolves or whatever. I think that was interesting and better than what we had before, where you kind of felt like you were at the mercy of what your opponent was doing. It felt a little bit. It wasn't less punishing, but it was, it didn't happen quite as often that you got punished for just, in old Innistrad, it did feel like there was some times where you're just like, go, and then the game was just kind of over. That didn't feel as quite as often this time. So I like that the mechanic works, but it is weird to me that they put that much effort into it only to produce cards that couldn't keep up with the format or that matched up so poorly with how the format played out with regards to removal or speed of the format or whatever it was. I actually still don't really know. To expand on this a little more, we have our category that we talked about before with like, what's the card that you read and you still think like this card looks pretty good and it just doesn't really fit. I would attach that to like most of the werewolves. Like most of them are like, hey, this has decent stats up front. And if you take a turn off, it's like huge and like pretty scary and like kind of a threat that they're going to have to deal with at some point or whatever. And man, playing the set, it just never went like that. Like it felt like werewolves just got picked off left and right. We talked about it before, but some of the finer points on it didn't work out really well, particularly with the black removal spells, right? The fact that Defenestrate killed literally all the werewolves, no matter what side they were on, is like, that's rough. And then Olivia's Midnight Ambush ends up being really awkward just because like when you finally put all the work in to flip your werewolf is when Olivia's Midnight Ambush kills all of them. It didn't matter which one, it just 2 mana to kill a werewolf. And that's a common. Both of those are commons and they saw heavy play. So that was pretty tough for them too. But even things like the bounce spells and stuff were tough because they're like, okay, I'm going to take a turn off, but my guy's going to be a 6/5. And it's like, okay, cool. It's like on top of your library or whatever. And that was tough too. I just can't quite figure what missed here. Was it just that the other cards were too good? Is that what it is?
I think that was a big part of it for sure. The other thing is like playing red green felt like playing a core set deck. Your cards were just all big vanillas. You had nowhere a way to get card advantage, and it's kind of crazy. Every other color had efficient cards, ways to get card advantage, and good removal. And the red and green cards just like weren't any of those things, with like maybe maybe eccentric farmer being one of the few ways to get card advantage. Mm-hmm. So I think that the fact that Olivia's Midnight Ambush and Silverbolt specifically picked on werewolves was just kind of cherry on top.
Yeah, Silverbolt too. Yeah. Oh God.
But overall, I do think that it was bad that the werewolves deck was so bad. I think that is unfortunate. That said, the gameplay was good enough that I think that the set was still a success, and it just again really just shows how much that fun I think is ultimately what matters. I do think that this set was a little too high on the removal and card draw, so that's something I would expect not to see in most sets.
Would it have been more fun? It was fun enough, but if they had balanced it, it would be more fun.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Because one of the things there's two parts, right? There's the drafting part and the playing part. This set I think was nearly an A+ when it comes to the playing part, A+, and like kind of like a B- when it comes to the drafting part. Just because how often did you look at and you're like, well, I'm going to take Organ Hoarder over these cards, and then I'm going to take Olivia's Midnight Ambush, and now I'm just going to take good blue and black cards. And there was some amount of like interesting stuff like, okay, which direction am I going? Is this the time? Do I want Flip the Switch, or do I want Hobbling Zombie or whatever? But for the most part, the drafts weren't like the most intricate. And then the fact that you're really highly incentivized not to take red cards at the very least meant that the directions you started with were lessened, which I think does take away from how fun it is to do the draft portion.
Yeah, and a lot of people really do focus on that part. I know a lot of people who draft and then they're like, don't do well in the first couple of rounds, and they're like, cool, I get to draft again. It's like
drafting is in a lot of ways the fun part, and I think having that draft experience be less good. I mean, you spend so much more time playing, which is why I kind of care about the gameplay a lot, but I do think that the drafting part would have been more fun if there was more options in the drafting part.
What did the format teach us? How did it make us better at limited, or what did we learn? What were the takeaways from this format?
I think the biggest thing for me is how good mechanics can be when they're fully supported. Like we've had a bunch of sets where mechanics, every set has mechanics that are more or less supported, right? Mm-hmm. There's ones that really get there and there's ones that don't. Decay might have gotten there more than any mechanic I can think of in the recent history, where every card with Decay was just so unbelievably good that it was just like, wow, they gave us tons of ways to make zombies and tons of ways to use them. And as a result, Decay was like a dominant force in the format. And it's a good reminder of how powerful a set mechanic can be when it is properly supported.
Yeah, I like that. That's definitely one of the big ones. The self-correcting nature of draft, right? We talk about that a lot, but it kind of felt like in AFR, it didn't really have the ability to self-correct around the black-red deck. And here it did, right? We had the blue-black deck kind of come out of the gates. We talked about it early in the set. It ended up being heavily drafted and still good. Even, it supported about 2.5 drafters or something at the table. It was really strong. But ultimately, we did end up finding a bit of balance, right? It wasn't all blue-black all the time for the whole format.
Yeah, and I think that it helped that if white wasn't good, this format would have been unplayable.
Yes.
Like it added a bunch of decks to the format that otherwise wouldn't have existed.
Yeah, and Santi once again giving his take on red green werewolves.
But I think that the self-correcting nature of draft really helps, and this is why it seems like a dream that there were ever non-human drafts on Arena, but bot drafts on Arena used to really bite into my enjoyment. I just didn't do them,
dude. I just got shivers when you said that. Right. Like that did not sit well. I forgot about that. I think I blocked it out. Yeah,
and I think that this format does show that when there are reactions to things, it does help remind you that this is an interactive game, even in the draft portion, not just in the playing portion.
Yeah. Yeah. Really cool set. And boy, the gameplay was insane. My takeaway from it was that they definitely have a slider bar that they can adjust as far as gameplay goes. Cause we went from AFR, which didn't have particularly complex gameplay, lots of die rolling and dungeon stuff that was kind of on rails, to this set where, players like you really flourished, right? I mean, this let you really kind of flex your muscles and impose your strategic will on people. I mean, I watched you stream over and over and over, and I don't think that there's been a set in recent memory where, I'm watching along with you and kind of thinking about what I would do. And then you do something different, even subtle stuff. And I'm like, oh, right. Okay. Cause that does. And I just missed it. And I mean, I definitely felt like this was the hardest set to play in a really long time. And the set that gave me the most kind of, I'm not sure where I'm going here with this game. Am I trying to win this soon? Am I going to win this with these decay zombies? Do I need to start getting rid of them? And it was very punishing. It really was. This format was very difficult to play from a gameplay perspective. Lots of stuff to track. And then the overarching, strategic narratives were different than normal. And I think that was really cool. Like, it's great for, really insanely good players like you. And for people like me, it's a good reminder. Hey, you got a long way to go. I felt like, some flashes of when I first started playing Magic again, where I'm just kind of like, what am I doing here? Where am I going? What am I doing? And I think that's a really cool thing. I mean, I wouldn't want that every single set. It would be kind of a headache at some point, but like, I'm really glad that these sets are still out there.
It was even more stark in comparison to the fact that our last set was a core set, right?
Yeah.
Like the Adventure of the Forgotten Realms was effectively a core set. So it really was a sharp contrast there. But I agree that the gameplay was awesome. It
was really great. Like, yeah, really, really great. Okay. Well, what grade would you give this set, Luis?
I would give it an A-. Mm-hmm. I've kind of started in the last couple Sunset shows just correlating grades to how much I played and enjoyed the format. And this is like an A-. This is very, very close to like what I want out of a format. And the fact that the balance wasn't there, and the fact that there was a lot of the werewolves were bad in the werewolf set, all that is true. But I played a ton of this set. I voted with my wallet and my time, and this is a set I enjoyed a lot. So I'm just going to give it an A.
Yeah, I gave it a B+. I actually was going to also give it an A-, but I recognized something today when doing the show notes, which is that once the Vintage Cube came out on Magic Online again, I haven't gone back. And that isn't always the case. It isn't always the case. Like, there are lots of times where I'll bounce back and forth. Like, I do love vintage cubing, but if this set's good enough, I'll be like, I don't want to mess with Magic Online, or, I don't have any tickets on there.
You need a palette cleanser every now and then from the raw power of Vintage Cube, go back to some Kaldheim drafts, then go back to the Vintage Cube.
Right. And that hasn't been the case. I've been loving the Vintage Cube. It's been super fun, but that means, and I'll tell you what, it's not just that I haven't done it. I don't really want to. Like, I think I'm feeling kind of lucky that this was the one weird time when the new set's going to come out so much earlier than it normally would, because I think that the lack of that draft flexibility kind of has affected me subconsciously, where I'm like less excited to do the draft. I really like to play. I'd really like to play the format, but I do feel punished for trying new things too often, I think. I think if you try any fringe archetype, if you try any build around, if you try any color pair that isn't one of the kind of core ones, I really feel like I'm making a mistake too often. And that does lead to repetitiveness when it's like the same 3 colors every time, or that type of thing. I was kind of excited because TBS came on and we talked about a couple alternate builds that he liked. So that probably would have got me back in, but that's why I bumped it down a little. Still, a B+ is a really good grade, and it did manage to survive its flaws quite well and prove to be, a really deep, good format, and one that I would revisit again. So, as much as I'm nitpicking here, I'm giving it a B+. Like, it almost got an A for me as well.
Yeah. No, I think the format was successful, but I agree with those criticisms.
What was your favorite card of the format?
I think overall, Geistfund Reservoir was the card I enjoyed playing with the most. It just lots of options. I don't know. I like options.
Yeah, that one was really cool. For me, it was one that I wish it actually performed well for its color, but it was one I wish I could have played more of. It's Rise of the Ants. God, I love that card. I love cards that stabilize the board, give you a little life bump. You just feel really like, hey, that's something to work towards, right? If I can cast and flash back a Rise of the Ants, there's no ground game that's really going to beat me, right? Like I'm going to be fine on the ground and I can kind of focus my energies on the things that I worry about in the air or whatever. That is the one archetype that if I could turn the ratchet up on, I would, which is the blue-green flashback deck, the rampy flashback deck. It ended up being playable. Like you could play that color pair if you got some powerful stuff, but I wish it was just a little more on the level of like, just like bumping up against that second tier.
Yeah, that deck was really fun to play.
Super fun. Yeah. I mean, it had a bunch, I think probably the runner up for my favorite card, in the format, would be Root Coil Creeper. Like that card was just super fun too. So anyway, Rise of the Ants wins it for me. Okay. Well, that's going to do it for the Sunset Show for Innistrad Midnight Hunt. A really good set. That was interesting to talk about and threw a lot of curveballs at the community. And we kind of came to our consensuses as we did. And I'll miss it. And I'm curious to see what they do with a similar landscape with Crimson Vow, which is where we're going to be pointing our attention going forward. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. Our goal is to basically have this show available to you wherever you would like to listen to it. So you can find it on YouTube. You can, of course, subscribe on any podcast app or program or anything like that you want, that you use. We're also on Spotify. We're on Pandora. There's somewhere else where we are that I can't remember. Stitcher Radio, if anybody uses
Stitcher
that.
Was the one I was going to say. Yeah.
If people use that, we're there, Google and Apple and all that, of course, too. And again, our goal is to have the show available. You can even just download it. Like we literally just put a download link where you can have an MP3 that you can, I don't know, do whatever you want with. So there you go. lrcast.com for that. We want to thank our sponsors, channel fireball.com. Make sure you check them out for really anything you need magic related. And also, check out, MTG Vegas coming up. I'll put a link in the show notes to that. I'm going to be there and I hope to see you there. And again, if you do end up picking up anything over at CFB, if you'd use the affiliate code LR, I do appreciate it. Also, FTX.us here in the United States and FTX.com for outside. That's for really anything you need digital asset wise. They're always growing, always trying out new stuff. And if you want to educate yourself and check it out, that is a great place to do it. Again, neither Luis and I are registered investors, so make sure that you consult one before doing investing of any kind. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of LR. And we'll see you next week.
So, well, one of the things I've adapted to as I'm recording a podcast while the baby, I hope folks weren't too annoyed by it. He only chimed in a few times, but
hey, Santiago's part of the podcast. Like he can chime in whenever he dang well feels.
Is actually one of the big things is because he's in full limpet mode right now, where like he doesn't like to sleep without us holding him, like, which is a very common thing, like for newborns. And so I spend a lot of time holding the baby, whether he's awake or asleep, right? And it has made me adapt a lot of my like daily life of like, how can I do things effectively one-handed? And there's a lot to adjust there. It's just an interesting, kind of space to be in, where it's like, okay, there's some things that like I figured out, like, okay, I can do this now. Like I need to fill up this water pitcher. How am I going to do that?
Or that's funny.
Or like, where can I put things around the kitchen so that I can grab them without it being too difficult? Or like, what kind of meals can I prepare while holding him? Because like, obviously I'm not doing these like, I'm not like grilling or whatever, but like,
right.
I can, there's plenty of stuff I can put together and, obviously leaning a lot on like ordering food or like, stuff I can just heat up in like a microwave or whatever. But it's just been interesting kind of that adjustment to like, here's a challenge. how would you lead your daily life if you had to carry, a 10-pound baby in your arm the whole time?
Oh yeah, that's crazy.
And or how would you record a podcast if?
Well, we'll figure that out. Still, don't worry.
Yeah. But no, it's obviously been great, and I don't know. I like a challenge. I always have. So, it's been something to adjust to, and something that I've managed to figure out, I think, fairly well.
Well, we're glad to have you back, buddy.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be back.